almost on 6 months on the roof line.
This guy keeps freaking me out every time I do one. He goes, "Is that the right way up?"
It's the right way up. Sure it's the right way up? You sure? You would not want to stuff that up because we've just got enough to get that pelmet finish, which is in the bedroom.
Not look. Skill.
Every time Janet makes a dress or does something with the sewing machine, it's like, it's her gig. I'm not allowed to learn how to use the sewing machine.
Oh, you are?
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
You're not letting me. Oh. We've got Lexi, 14 years old on Wednesday. Aren't I? 14. Still coming to work.
Not as often.
Hey? So I'm very beautiful, aren't I? Alright. Pull it up, Charles. Beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. Yeah, they come up really well. Give it down, break it. One of the problems living here in Jervis Bay, we have no refueling set up. Even on our major boat ramps, there's no bows or there's no way to refuel, so it's all done by jerry cans. So I've got a siphon jiggler that I jiggle the fuel in, and now that we've got this engine fixed 2 days ago, so still buzzing about getting that going. And I know that I'm on the homeward run with those problems with that engine until the next problem. Now that I've got that going, I've got very little fuel left in that tank. I think I only put 40 litres in, and we've basically run it for an hour and a half, so there's probably about 35 litres left. But I've got another 40 litres here, and I'm going to put in probably 3/4 of it into there and another 10 litres into the other side, so that we can go for a test run out in the bay next week. That's the plan. We've got a few things to do. We've got a lot to do here. The rigging is probably in about 2 weeks' time max, which is bloody exciting, but I've got a lot to do. I've got put a lot of clutches in, some deck organisers, so that we can at least hoist Rolly and his team up the mast to do the rigging. And that's going to mean I'm going to be cutting into the roof and drilling holes, and obviously we've got to fit all of that stuff. I don't want to fit all of it, I just want to fit enough to get him up the mast and rig, so that then I can consider the deck layout, because I don't want lines crossing over each other. I don't want to have a mess. I want to have a real good think about how we're going to do all that deck layout with all the running rigging. Very important. We have got the winches in place. So we've got a friction, sort of a low friction runner here. It's not going to be ideal, but hopefully we won't have too much friction on this as it comes down through the clutches and down into the power winch here. And this 45 is just a manual winch. So this one here, I want to make sure that I can at least pull someone up the mast and have obviously a backup on this one here while we have somebody up the mast rigging the boat. So yeah, everything else is working really well. The only thing we haven't got is the windlass switch isn't hooked up here. We're still relying on the remote control up the front, and that'll be another thing I'll get sorted over the next couple of weeks. One of the other concerns we had from basically launch week was the steering. We've got some seepage of the steering. So my emergency tiller setup is going to consist of a deck hatch in the step, and then a number of flanges and glands that are going to take a pipe down into the actual rudder itself, and then come back to a tiller. Stand and hand steer it in the event of a failure of our hydraulic steering. Now I do believe that they do fail. I don't think I'm going to have a problem, but I do have a little bit of leakage on some of the fittings, so that means I'm going to have to be continually topping up the oil until I work out all of the fittings. But I just want to have a backup. At least I can hand steer the boat with at least one tiller. It may not mean that it's linked on the other side, but who knows, we'll just see how that goes. So I've bought this deck fitting, which is too big, but I've actually worked out a way that I can have a smaller flange underneath it and then another one underneath it, and then essentially we'll have on the top of our carbon rudder here some sort of a keyway that the tube can fit into. The whole idea will be that above that will be this 50mm, it's only PVC, but I'm going to back it with some solid glass, and the tube can actually come down through that into this and interlock into it, so that I can at least manhandle the steering. I just took a plumb bob off here to get the exact centre. I'll drill a hole up through it, and then I'll be putting in this hatch, which is going to be around about here. It's a shame it's not centred, but that's going to be cool. And then I can start working on backing it, and then ultimately having the tube go through the centre. What I'm going to need is a bit of gal pipe with a keyway in it, so that I can enact the steering. And Janet's got a coffee in there that's just taken way too long. we had a bit of an incident a minute ago. We realised that we boiled dried our kettle on our induction cooker. That's how quick that induction stuff works. And it was seriously hot, and I put some fresh water in and got a bit of a steam burn. So yeah, I should have just woken up to myself and chucked it in the sea. So this is our rather robust rudder system, and you can see how solid this is with these Jaffa bearings. There's one here and one here, and obviously the carbon shaft comes up and there's an aluminium sleeve here and here engaged into those, and then we've got a spacer ring. Under here we have two what we call per-lip seals, which are actually seals that seal down with a similar to an O-ring. There's two of those, and then we have this slip ring, a lock ring, and then the tiller itself. And obviously we need to put a hole. I've actually drilled a hole here. I'm going to put a bolt through here, and then I'm going to have some sort of a keyway on the top here. Right, there's only one problem. Couldn't fit the drill under, so I'm using a needle of a drill bit to get the actual pilot hole to then hole saw down from the top. I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm going to have to block this off so it doesn't end up in any fiberglass down inside the rudder. Not that it's going to matter. I just don't want any debris down there if I can help it. Probably will seal the top of this up with epoxy or something just to stop anything from getting down in there, because we don't want any water getting in there and sitting at any point. So pretty much that's going to be the centre. Get my hole saw burrowed out and start to put the hatch. The key that I found to drilling into foam core is to drill a little bit at a time and chisel it off, and that way you can get your hole saw deeper and deeper and deeper into the core. Once you're in there, chisel all the foam out, then you get to the bottom substrate, and it's a lot easier than trying to pack up a shallow hole saw. Like this is a cheap shitty hole saw, but once you fill it up to about halfway, it's useless. It won't cut anymore because it can't get any further into that basin of the actual of the hole saw. So drill millimeters at a time, and then eventually you'll get through the core and then you're ready to go. So just chisel the core out, and then you're down just to the bottom substrate, which can be easily hole sawed out, and then basically I'm ready to fit the hatch. And one of my favourite scenes is that over there, Janet polishing. Yeah, having fun?
Not quite polishing yet. Finishing off where Dagmar was working really hard.
Yeah. So 2 weeks ago we had Jeff and Dagmar here, and they did a heap of work. Jeff helped me a lot with the plumbing, and we got the traveller track on for the jib, which was so important because that was a lot of work, and bloody hard work too, because it was pretty hot. And this weekend we've got 35 degrees both days, so it's going to be a stinker. And Janet's on marine rescue tomorrow out on the big boat, and I'll be here working on this job and a couple of other big jobs I've got going, including plumbing and this emergency tiller situation, so that at least we've got some sort of a backup when we head out next week to give the boat a good sea trial. That's exciting. Alright, coming to the end of this project. Had a bit of a big day. I've been down here, I put an extra bolt through our rudder shaft, and I've also tightened up our cotter pin bolt there. I'm actually intending to replace this guy over here with some sort of a stainless cotter pin. At the moment I've just got a bolt in it, but these are already clamped on here, but I've drilled a hole through the carbon, and that was harder than you can imagine, drilling through that, and put an M12 bolt through it. So now she's totally secure. Now we're back onto the hatch here. Here we've basically got it mounted, all the holes in it. We've got the flange all ready to go underneath. So this guy's going to sit underneath and allow for a bit of an axle for the emergency tiller. And I've got some Sikaflex on, and we'll just get one of these started. On Monday, I completed the whole backbone for the starboard side plumbing, and that PEX system is, it's difficult to deal with because it is incredibly rigid, and I think I've got good routing for my lines. And I just spent an hour up at one of the major plumbing places in Sydney yesterday when I was up there with Sam, hunting down connections for the Jabsco pumps. So what we've come up with is these screw-on fittings that basically mount onto the actual Jabsco mount. Now, the issue I've got is obviously this is an American product. These threads, finally we found something that actually fit it. But I've got a PEX system here. The issue is, how do I swap out a pump? So what's great about these pump systems is that the fitting is removable. It has an O-ring seal, so you can actually remove it, and then I'll be able to screw that in place onto the accumulator tank once this is crimped together, and then simply install to the pump, which will be mounted on the wall. So you've got to think all this through. This has been probably pretty more complex than I thought it was going to be. And the other day I stood at a range of plumbing fittings for probably an hour and a half, trying to go from one to the other, from one thread to another. And then this is another issue with that imperial and metric system that we're all working with, is nothing is standard, and all of the good stuff seems to come out of the US. It is a big consideration when you're plumbing a boat. You want to make sure you try to get standardization all the way through, and stuff you can buy in a simple hardware store, not from a specialist where you have to air freight the stuff in and be able to keep a number of fittings as a spare on board so you can always swap out. And yet again, we've torn the boat apart. So we've lifted the toilet out, everything's out. And I'm down here in the portside head. This is a pretty important one. It's got a lot to happen in here. I've just pulled through the PEX into the back of the shower there. Luckily I've got a big access point behind the shower, and it means that I can pretty much get to all the plumbing down there. I've already hooked up the pump and it's running, and I need to sort out the accumulator tank, and I've got the macerator built in there for the blackwater tank removal. So there's a lot of plumbing happening here, but I've established what I need to do. It's just a matter of getting it all in. Now down in here in my cupboard from hell, I've got a lot of other things happening. We've got hydraulics, throttle cables, electrics, plumbing, and now this concoction of hot and cold water here. These need to extend back towards the water heater, which is right at the very back of that engine room. This is the problem engine I've got that I was talking about a moment ago. This engine here, I'm waiting on Paul to come back with my new injectors, and the injectors have actually hit the country, so he's going to be here next Wednesday. It's Thursday afternoon right now, so I've got about 5 days to prepare for him to come. Not that I need to do anything. All he's got to do is plug the injectors in, put the tappet cover back on, and we're ready to go. Hopefully that's going to be the resolution of that issue. And while I'm waiting on that, I'm trying to get this plumbing sorted, and I have to do a lot of routing to make sure that everything's nice and neat, because as you can see, I've got the saltwater deck wash there. I've got throttle cables that need to sort of be tidied up, wiring and everything, because I want everything tidied up, hopefully prior to Paul coming and fixing that engine, so that we can then drive the boat somewhere without getting a wire caught in a V-belt or something. Anyway, that's for later on. But yeah, the disastrous cupboard I've got down here, and this one here and in here is my focus right now to get this plumbing done. I've already teed off these connectors here, and you got to allow yourself a little bit of extra space to get the crimper out of the actual road, to make sure you can make your connections. And down in here in the back of the shower here, I've got a pump that is already operating. So as soon as I hook all this up, I can start to work on the tank fitting. That's going to be great, just to have fresh water on the boat. And we're bringing it down in 20-litre jerry cans at the moment, just living off jerry cans. And you know, here we are 4 months later, we're still camping. Funnily enough, we've only spent one night on the boat, so that's pretty tragic given we've had the bloody thing on the water for 4 months. And I'd like to come down and spend a week down here, because then I'd save all the travelling back and forth. And I'm pretty well organised down here. I can pretty much do 3 or 4 days work without having to go back to the factory now. We've got a lot of the main stuff done, like the linings and the works. But for now, plumbing is it, and it's my sole focus right now. Now I've got that one established there, I can now come in and crimp this one here. So it's important to not get ahead of yourself here. If you get ahead of yourself, you're in trouble, because you can end up not being able to crimp something. So that T-piece down in there needs to be done, and then that continues on into the engine room so that I can hook it up to the hot water system and also to run an offshoot off that for a freshwater shower and freshwater deck wash at the back of the boat up in the sugar scoop. Some of these connections are just brutal because this stuff is so inflexible, and I'm almost inclined to get a heat gun every now and then, but I don't want to be heating it too much because you'll obviously change the properties of the plastic. But it's not too bad to do a little bit of heat gun. But I've got this one, and I think I'm going to have to use a heat gun to get this one on, because this one here has to go right underneath into the engine room and all the way back to the hot water system, and I've got to somehow get it crimped in this tiny little robe that I've got here. Stuck in this freaking old house. Right, black's hot in this boat. You get that? And it's on the left-hand side. I'll have you know, kids. It's probably on the wrong side. We were editing the launch video the other day with Sam, and he came across a piece of footage where Ellen and Sam were joking about how this was a Mervyn boat. What that actually means is that my father's house, all the plumbing's back to front. And in that case, it was the steering was back to front, and Zach had to rectify that. But Ellen and Sam said it's just like a Mervyn boat, and I was devastated. So I rang Ellen and I got into her. She just knows how to push my buttons, and I've spent my whole life trying not to be my dad, and then I'm really glad I am my dad's son. How's that? I'm happy to build a Mervyn boat because it's my boat, and I won't have anyone enter into any argument about it. But anyway, here we go. Can I have my crimper, please?
On your dreams, son.
Hang on a second. Now I've done that. That's going to be good. So. Jeez, that's all right for you, is it?
Dick Dastardly over there.
Just watching
I always call Ross Dick Dastardly, if any of you can remember the character. Yeah.
Now the other thing I did too, over here, this is the solenoid for the toilet. So this is fresh water coming in, and what this does is when the toilet's feeding, it stops the water flow so that there's no chance of any bacteria or E. coli or anything entering our fresh water system, which would have to go all the way back down there and up to here. I'm not convinced I know what that is, but that could easily have gone to a tap, I think. That would have been pretty easy. Mm-hmm. But then, that wouldn't have worked.
No, I think you should have a manual, but...
Because it would have only been cold water.
Ross doesn't believe in manuals, I believe in them.
No, I'm just going by feel.
So when the whole place erupts with poo, we know it didn't read the right.
It's not going to erupt with poo. Mind you, it is a boat, and boat heads tend to, at some point, erupt with poo. or generally it's all over the person trying to clean the blackwater tank out because there's been too much toilet paper flushed. So we're going to have toilet paper less. Actually, I'm going to put in a bum gun.
Oh, don't get vulgar.
Just get onto the pores of my nose. Could you have that any closer? I reckon just have a little outlet here with a gun and just a bit of a washout.
Oh, stop. You're just going silly now.
Well, the Finns do it. The Japanese do it.
Lots of people do it, but you don't need to talk about it on video.
You never have to buy toilet paper.
But you just don't need to talk about it.
That's part of owning a boat, is knowing about people's toilet paper.
Yeah, but people don't want to listen to that.
Oh, this thing is shitting me.
You just quit yourself.
Surprise, surprise.
Well, you should just concentrate on the job rather than look at the camera.
Fucking every minute of the day I'm cutting myself. Because I'm just not designed to be in little spaces.
Look at what you're doing, not what you're doing.
Watching what I'm doing. Cramping up again. So what you don't cleave your fingers, because your fingers and pecs. So the other night I embarked on a rush project to put together an emergency tiller arm, and I've done all the work on the boat that's required. I've put a bolt in the rudder shaft, and I've put a hole in the deck with a hatch and a carbon sleeve, and then I came up with this ugly piece of fabrication. It's just a couple of Gal water pipes welded together with a brace. Took it down to the boat and I had the angle wrong. I hadn't factored in what the slot angle was going to be. Now the other thing that came up was this bent. Because it's such a thin wall of gal steel. It's probably only 1.6 millimeters thick. As soon as I applied any pressure on it, I was trying to see whether it would work with the hydraulics engage, and there is an emergency relief valve, ball valve, that I can pull open to allow for the fluid just to run through the system, and that hopefully will make the steering better. Worst case is I can disconnect the rudder from the hydraulic ram and just operate the rudder by hand with the tiller. But given that that bent, I've actually decided I'm going to weld in a thicker piece of steel into here, which is probably going to melt this bush that's actually keeping it straight. It's going, actually, in fact, I'll cut that off. I'm going to cut this off and give it a good polish up and get it all finished anyway. But I'm going to weld this piece of steel in so that I can actually make it a little bit stronger. It certainly wasn't strong enough. I mean, this just basically bent, and that slot is where the bolt fits through in the center there. I'll MIG weld it all up, get it all together, go down and work out the exact angle that this needs to be, which I think is actually through here, or yeah, it might be a little bit further over, and then I can re-weld the whole thing up. And to further beef it up, I've actually welded a washer onto the end here, which will actually give the pipe strength on the circumference of it. So I've got double thickness pipe and a washer on the end, and then I'll cut the slot. Hopefully that'll make it strong enough. And you know, it's only an emergency thing. Hopefully we'll never have to use it, but who knows. I'll just give this a bit of a fill now. Pretty ugly welding, but you know, what do you do? Our emergency tiller I've been working on has got a 316 stainless hatch that's going to allow me to put the tiller through. Now, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. Who builds boats, who used to use these exclusively on his boats, and now he uses plastic. And there's a very good reason. 316 with a fine thread will gall up, and he said whatever you do, slather the thing in grease, marine grease, silicone gel, whatever you can put in it, because if you don't, then it could easily bind up, and when you most need it, you won't be able to get it apart. So I'm going to just put some silicone grease and at least get the thing from, you know, stop it from seizing up. There's also a problem too, because I can't close it all the way down. I need to make sure that I can get that all the way down so the O-ring will seal and stop water getting in there and hence going into the rudder. Alright, that's now sealed, and hopefully we won't ever have to use it, but at least it's got some grease on it to make it usable. I can see it galling up because already just putting it on a couple of times it's galled up. It's got a really super fine thread, very very high pitch thread, and yeah, this stuff just welds itself together if you get any heat. Anyway, it's going to sit out in the sun forever. Should be usable.